Okay, hi. So in this video, we want to talk about the active attribute. We will use this attribute quite a lot in the next couple of videos. So this is just a really simple first time looking at it. The idea of the active attribute is that we can turn things on and off. It's a little bit like sleeping, but only that we control it via an attribute, which is great because it allows us to have more control over our simulation. Because the active attribute can not only be set in the beginning, but also change during the simulation. So what we have here, first of all, is our Mars statue here, and we use a Voronoi fracture to create a couple of pieces, nothing special, and that goes into our bullet solver with the ground, and I haven't changed any defaults, and that was too fast. Let's activate real time, and if I run this, you can see it just implodes in itself, which is not unexpected. Now, as usual, to change an attribute, I would always recommend to pack your geometry. So for that, I use an assemble because it will find every single piece automatically as long as we keep create name attribute on and activate create pack geometry. And what we have now is 248 pieces. So let's see if it still works. And of course it does. Now, it's much easier once it's packed to add attributes, and we use a point wrangler for this. And the attribute we want to change is the active attribute. And this is an integer. So let's set it to 0 to turn everything off to check if our system actually works. So theoretically, nothing should happen if I press start, and that's the case. So let's see how we can control, and let's call this actually active 0, how we control this with a group, for example. And we could just say, all right, let's activate all the points in the upper area, like here, and only activate those. So let's keep it at group 1 because we're lazy, and I create another point wrangle and set the integer active to 1, but only for the points in group 1. Make sure it's actually a point group, not a primitive group. If I press start now, you can see only the top part breaks apart because only that part was active and the lower part is inactive. And this already gives you a bit of control over your simulation. Now what we will see later on is that, of course, like I said, we can change this attribute over time, and we have then more control about how our destruction is happening. And here we could actually finish because this is really all we need to understand. Now one last thing though, you can use the RBD configure to set this active attribute because this is already built in, as you can see here. There it is. And here you can also set it to 0 and 1, or you can use a create attribute node. Of course, there are many other ways of doing it, but I, as user, prefer the Vex way because it gives us a bit more control, and in my opinion, it's easier to keep track of what's going on. In that context, there's a small thing I would like to add, and that is currently we changed the active attribute, before the simulation starts. So, only the things that are active are, falling down, the rest will not move. That's easy to understand because those are attributes that are set as a starting state before it goes into our simulation. And this is something we saw many times before. But what we will see in the next video is that we can actually animate this over time. And what we've learned so far on Vellum, for example, is that we can only do this when we go inside of our simulation, for example, into the dive target. And that's actually true. We could change the attribute, for example, the active attribute inside of here. But what we will see in the next videos, we can actually do this outside, which is a very special thing about the RBD bullet solver. Certain attributes will be constantly read in from outside our simulation. And this can be found here under properties, override attributes. And here you find a list of all the attributes that will be read out constantly. And later on we will see we can even add our own attributes to it. But as you can see here, the active and a couple of other attributes that we will talk about are already written in here as a default. I almost forgot to mention that because, it is already the default, so it works by itself, but I think you should know why it works. That's a special thing of the RBD bullet solver. It has this override attributes functionality. Okay, so that much about the active attribute. We will talk more about this because there's a bit more to know about it because it works together sometimes with the deforming and the animated attribute, which allows to switch states between simulated and not simulated. We will talk about this, but for now, just understand that the active attribute allows us to turn pieces in our simulation on and off, which is already pretty powerful. So let's see this attribute in action in the next couple of videos. So far, I hope this was helpful. Thanks very much and see you later. Cheers.